Welcome back to the Now Morning Show right here on TTT and TTT Live online. You can tune in to us on Talk City 91.1 FM as well. And this morning we'll be discussing, as Carrie mentioned earlier, the youth voice, identity, and elections. Joining us this morning is no stranger to the Now Morning Show, Amilcar Sanatan, who is an instructor with the Department of Geography. He's also a PhD candidate in Cultural Studies at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. Welcome. Good morning, Amilcar.
Morning, Ruckus. Morning. Glad to be here.
Nice to have you, man. So, we're discussing the need for strong black identity, knowledge of history, etc., to self-worth and value for life. With regards to what's taking place, especially in what people have been referring to as the disenfranchised communities. I know you've been very vocal about it on social media. How important do you think it is to mobilize the youth vote?
Mobilizing the youth vote is very important, and we see politicians have recognized this in light of the number of candidates that have young persons who are young in both major political parties. And we can see this is a development since 2007, where we have a greater investment in having youth representation, getting young persons at the table. But I must tell you, and I hope not to sound like a contrarian here, my job as a youth leader and a youth activist working with other national youth organizations is not just to get out the vote for young people, but to ask something deeper. What is the role of the politics of young people? Getting young people's vote is the hustle. We all know that, and that is the job of the politicians. Our job is something deeper and bigger. What is the role of politics in young persons' lives? What is the role of the politics of young people in our society? And that is why we think we need to have a youth mainstreaming approach, which gets young persons at the table to move from just tokenistic representation to have a seat at the table, but to really question what is the purpose and the meaning of this table itself. Getting young people involved in the design, the process, and the outcomes of decisions.
Interesting. So you don't think that right now, the way that it's set up, because I know that there, for example, there's a streamline of you can go from being a youth politician and have your say in your role, and then you go into whichever party you decide to, and then you can join the political stream and aspirations and be a part of and have a seat at that table. But what you're suggesting is that the young people don't actually have a say in any of it that happens?
I wouldn't suggest that. I think that they have to walk a tightrope when they become involved into political parties. And I think everyone has a calling. Some people get the calling to play West Indies cricket, the men's or the women's team. Some people have a calling to be a DJ and sing soca and drop a tune. Some people have a calling to be a priest and a pundit. Likewise, some people have a political calling.
Right.
They have to work very hard at Christmas, at every public holiday, and at SCA time. And what we see is young people, the kind of Grobrox approach, where we see youth senators, the senatorship, allowed to popularize some young people and introduce them into the national community. That was useful. But more importantly, we are seeing increasingly, not as large as we wanted or as wide as we wanted, the local government track where they get involved into municipal politics and then move into national politics. I think we need to do a lot more to get young persons. And I believe parties that are very serious about youth candidates would have a youth candidate guarantee as a policy to field a certain quota of youth candidates at each general election as well as local government election. But I am happy to see the increased number of young persons whom I respect. But Ruckus, be very clear, this is also an outcome of our GATE generation. After over a decade of GATE, we have qualified young people from all walks of life, especially lower working and lower middle classes, who have seen the role of the state in their lives and now want to execute leadership in governing the state.
Right. But those are the very particular ones who were able to benefit from GATE and from the education and all that stuff, and they want to play a role in leadership. But how do you reach the youth who may be disenchanted or disengaged or apathetic or mistrusting of authority and the leaders?
That's a great point. You see, the thing is, with young persons, we like preferred youth. We like youth who have a certain type of articulation like this. Sometimes they don't like you to look like me. And if you ain't like who look like me, and like real people. Because I only nice end of it. You know what I mean? Not that I swerve or swaggy. But I'm trying to tell you, it have a certain type of rough youth where we get vexed with the articulation. We get vexed with the lack of qualifications. Then we tell them, you have all these opportunities for skills and you're not taking the opportunity. But the data show that skills don't match with opportunities, and persons with few skills also have much fewer opportunities. So there's a way we need to get involved with non-aligned youth. Not all youth will become involved with organizations, but also we need to see young persons who may not fit our radar of what is the ideal of the society and start to undermine these dominant ideas of what is the type of citizen we have, what is the type of leader we have, and that is very important. And a lot of the times we need to look at poor persons, young persons in rural areas, but there's also young people in urban geographies, and we saw that with East Port of Spain.
Hmm. How do we identify and work with? I know you've been saying ever since the protest action happened last week. You've been on social media saying that sometimes these people can't speak for themselves. They can't articulate what they really feel and how they've been feeling for some time. And you've taken it upon yourself to translate some of that feeling, that emotion, that just bursting at the seams, or what appears to be bursting at the seams. And you've been taking the liberty of translating that and talking to these people. Is it that the current representatives that represent these communities don't speak on their behalf, or they don't understand what needs to be spoken of, or have they been doing the work and it's just not, we're not seeing the fruits of it, or what do you think is happening there?
Okay, well, you asked me two big questions. The first one is I think people speak well for themselves, but it's just that we don't listen. So when I was on social media, I was really translating for my people who not listening.
Right.
The conscientious educated group, the conscientious middle class, the so-called progressives, who always speak about the role of the state and the government and how we should do it better. But when poor people were crying and making noise, we weren't listening to that noise. So I just went to Damian Marley, more justice, and say, help the youth them first and ask the questions them after. And that was the work. As it relates to representation from the community, I think we have challenged the legitimacy of the idea of the son or daughter of the soil. And this idea that just because you grew up in a community some years ago, you have this organic relationship, this navel string to the community, and you are also in a position to scold them, to condescend, to tell them that you're being too greedy, you have to pull your bootstraps up like me. That is being called into question. The narrative of the great individual coming out of the circumstances of the ghetto has no longer hold. The ghetto is a social construct, but also a spatial construct. That means it is social as much as it is geographic. And that is why I have an issue with one of the statements from the community, which said that this is not a geographic problem. Fundamentally, it is a geographic problem. Westmoreland is not Mova. Sea Lots and Scorpion is not Shafler and Bonnier Gardens.
Very interesting. So if the committee were to say, Amilcar, we're interested in having your input on this committee, would you be willing to be a part of it?
Can you repeat that question? Sorry.
The same committee that you just said you had an issue with one of the statements that they made, right? If they were to engage you and your services to be able to assist these communities based on the mandate of the committee, would you be willing to be a part of it?
You come man, you're giving trouble here, man. I'm not singing for my supper, I ain't singing for my sada roti. I come here to make a contribution like a citizen, making a contribution to listen and do well. And as a citizen, I will always be willing to help. This is part of my PhD study. This is part of my activism, and I've been with this issue. With
Right.
the committee has done a good job, I would tell you. The first thing is understanding it's an intergenerational dialogue. Dr. Rowley, the Prime Minister, discussed how race is an important issue. And he was talking about one, yes, Afro Trinidadians understanding the sociological and historical roots to the conditions in East Port of Spain, but also the type of racist vitriol that will be charged against the committee. More importantly, the committee registered that this is not just a community project. This is tied to the COVID-19 relief and recovery, as they have termed it. That means urban development is part of national development. So I don't think there's any more intelligence that a committee needs. They have expert persons there. What I would suggest is an anthropological look to understand the cultural worldviews of people, how people see it, why rich people get jeeps and poor people get Jesus, and we think we could get to the same place at the same time. And that is the type of conversations where I am concerned what I would like to submit. So that type of cultural analysis, that geographic analysis, and I don't want us to downplay geography, not just because I am trained in cultural geography or worked in a geography department, but rather these problems are spatial, but as much a function of the type of urban decay, the degradation that is tied to the central capital city.
How do we begin to even fix it? Like all these things when you speak about it, it sounds so overwhelming. It sounds as though almost like there's little hope. How do we begin the fixing of this situation? How do we change the culture of the country and how we view these
The
places?
first thing we cannot do is lose hope in an alternative. But also, we cannot accept that somehow we could get over this and we overcome. This language of overcoming trauma, this language of overcoming poverty, has been some of the worst vocabulary we have introduced into the public lexicon. That these issues could be overcome, which is to undermine the psychic reality that we have. And the first thing we need to do is what Bob Marley told us, which is you're running away, but you can't run away from yourself. You cannot run away from yourself. And what does that mean? We need to think, yes, action items. I would tell you, in parts of Mova, right now when water does come 3 o'clock in the morning, when water running in the pipe, that is an alarm clock,
Yep.
You never see people scatter like that to go and get water, to bathe, to get ready for work, to fill up tank and fill up bucket to get ready for the next day. So this is a way we understand there are real situations, but it's not overwhelming, that the problem is deep. And what we need to move past is this idea that a great individual, that a political representative somehow solves the problems, but it is structural change and a commitment to eliminating poverty. And I want to be very clear, Ruckus, is that my commitment to the ghetto is not just to absolve gangs and to absolve youth who seem misdirected, right? It's actually to bring justice to the social workers, bring justice to the nurses, the primary school teachers, the early child care workers who live there every day and suffer under rich on poor violence, state on poor violence, as well as poor on poor violence.
So then, Amilcar, do you think then that the authorities just dismissing it as like, for example, the protest action that happened last week? Do you think that the authorities just dismissing it as, something that people put together and pay people to be a part of? Do we not see the validity in what it was, or do you agree that it was what they say it was?
Well, I am not a seer man, so I can't tell you the future, what happened in the past. But more importantly, I am also not employed by the national security.
Okay.
I cannot tell you the intelligence that the commissioner of police have. If I had that, I would have a very different work, and I might not be on TV this morning.
Right.
But I could say that in these communities, the legitimacy of gangs are real.
Right.
What hurts me, and I will be honest with you here, gangsters just squeeze poor people. You're driving a $1 million car and people living in shack and shanty house, and they have to live under that order. People protest, and I will not be surprised after elections, it's the same gangsters who get contracts to do the type of infrastructural work. And now the gangsters squeeze the government and they get the money, and the legitimacy is unchallenged. Challenging the legitimacy of gangs becomes very important to our work. And it's not just government versus gangs. It's about hegemony versus agency, dominance versus subordination, and the oppressed people needing their liberation, freedom, and more importantly, an enabling environment. So I can't say that gangs coordinated, but I ain't gonna lie to you, gangs is part of that reality. It's part of that reality in those communities. And some people don't like to hear that. But imagine the people who have to wake up to that every day. I telling you, fellas have bullets long like your finger here. People sleeping with their gun under the bed. This is the reality we have. Some people want a choice. When I work with young people there, I say, this is not the life for you. So part of the work is not even just infrastructural development, giving people roads, lights, bringing water, is also to having the type of psychic freedom, the mental health care that people would need to think about another life, and then creating an environment where that life becomes more possible. And that is why, yes, it is overwhelming. Yes, gangs are involved, but don't underestimate and undermine the civic leaders who have been part of this process, community leaders who have always fought against violence, who have fought against extrajudicial killings by the police, but also fought against violence within their own communities. I want to support that change, and the country needs to get behind that.
Agreed. You mentioned, the types of bullets people have and the types of guns that these guys have, and my question has always been, is where do they get it from? Where do they access it from?
Well, perhaps more expert person who involved with narco trafficking. It seems as if I deflecting on my questions here this morning, but I really look at how young persons participate. But with arms, arms are trafficked. That is a fact. Arms are shipped. And I'm telling you, with my own eyes, I have seen guns like golf clubs when people went to parties. People are there having fun. Just having a bottle of Hennessy here and the AAK walking around a session, you know, a little zest and thing when people have fun. What does that mean? That the issue for me, where I am concerned, is that a gun represents symbolic power for young men. A phallic symbol, an idea of male prowess and potency when you bust a gun and you're busting shots. And we need to talk to young men in a certain type of way, which is that a gun does not deliver manhood to you. That is the type of conversation. So I can't tell you the source of where these guns, I have better equipped persons to do that. But when boys choose a gun and I tell them to drop one, or a soca artist tell them to drop one, I need to tell you what else they could put into that hand. And that is the type of social interventions we need to make, which takes a long time and which means we need to work with focus groups in many places to make these kind of changes. And I would be very clear, even gangsters are in support of having less persons with guns.
That's interesting. Does that take away from their narrative and their ability to squeeze the community, as you were saying before? Because some of these guys, you're saying that they prey on the same community that is suffering while they are thriving in the community. If they are in support of reducing the amount of guns, then why can't they do it?
Well, I feel like a storytelling to Trinidad and Tobago this morning, you know what I mean? So for you know, Biggie Smalls, if you know, now you know. You know, I always had to quote my music, the great 20th century American philosopher Christopher Wallace.
Christopher Wallace,
put it in those terms. And what we see here, gangs don't have a recruitment form like it's URP, CPEP, or UTT and U, yeah? The allure of gangs is enough. The advertisement of a gang is already the product. It's the security, the comfort, the ability to procure social and symbolic resources which other persons don't have in these communities. The allure of the gang is enough. It's not what the gangster have to say, it's what the young person sees. And after a fight, imagine after a fight, a young boy gets in a fight and then some gangsters watch that and say, I like how you handle yourself, hold a gun. And that young fella go home and cry. You know why? Because he said, that man love me. That man see me, that man love me. The same thing I hear, the thing I know. So this is a situation where we cannot underestimate the legitimacy and the power and the resonance of gangs in these communities. If you drive in a certain type of vehicle and everybody have to walk foot and pull car and have beat up foreign news that mashing up in the same hole, you know who have the car and the jeep and you know who doesn't, and you know the means by which they acquired it. So having a diversity of leadership, given the chance, a real chance by giving more choices, an enabling environment to tell people they have many dreams is the cultural apartheid. And I even putting those words loosely or trying to be hyperbolic here. I'm sorry for taking long on this because it's something I really about. You have people in whole communities in Trinidad that don't know other religious groups, that have little proximity to other ethnicities, that don't go into Queen's Hall, the same as some people don't go into the social boundaries of what is seen as a ghetto. The cultural apartheid of Trinidad and Tobago is real. You know where to put down your clips when you're driving through a car, and then you get panic and anxiety if your car starts to slow down in one particular area. So don't remind me of the boundary in your mind that you said doesn't exist. It already existed. And we need to get young people in communities who not just deprived of resources, they are deprived of life chances and cultural participation, to let them to see many visions of themselves and not just have one-off role models and leaders come and talk to them in some heavy talk in the community.
Amilcar, I want to thank you very much, very, very much for having this conversation with me. I know we probably went on a little bit longer and I'm going to get cussed after, but that's a small thing because I think it needed to be said. And I think I really want to applaud you for the work that you've been doing, and I want to encourage you to continue doing the work. And I mean, reach out if you need assistance. We're here to get the message out with you as much as we possibly can, right? So thank you very much, Amilcar.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, man.